Or like, we'll talk about it. We're huge fans of fond.
Oh, yay.
We've tried it so many times. I think we worked with you guys in the past too. So
Amazing.
all around, really grateful to have you on. Jill, do you want to kick it off?
Yeah, well, so we were talking about how to go about learning more about you because I think as much as we want to learn
Yes.
about Fond, we want to understand what got you to the point of starting Fond. And I think
Yes.
one, we love interviewing moms that are also CEOs because we actually just interviewed a woman yesterday who she has three little boys, but she's running a company. And
Yeah.
it just really, it's cool for all of our listeners and for us, honestly, to see women who are doing it all. So we want to hear about your six kids and how you
Yeah.
manage everything. But if we could first just start off with your background and your health history, what made you get to the point of wanting to start a bone broth company? What led you there?
Yeah, it's a great question, right? Not every girl like wakes up, and their dream and their life is to own a bone broth company. So how did this happen? So my health history really starts when I was 5 years old. I had emergency kidney surgery. So something really random. It was a genetic disorder, and in utero, this is oversimplified, but essentially your kidney is in three parts and it grows together as the baby develops. And the top 2/3 of mine never grew together. So throughout my young life, it had started to rot and decay. So I had a septic emergency surgery. It was supposed to take 4 hours, took 14. And, part of my story is having to deal with the trauma of that event in my 30s because the kids are so resilient and the body sort of will help us as we have time, right, to process these things later on. But so really from a young age, struggled with health issues. And then, throughout my teens and young adult, had IBS. And so it was a nutrient absorption issue. And, it's funny, I love that being healthy is so more mainstream now. But back then, in my early 20s, no one talked about how much they pooped. No one talked about
Not at
what
all.
color
so
is it?
taboo. Yeah.
And it's like, and so I just didn't know that I wasn't this wasn't happening normally. And so, I'm going pretty high level, but I got pregnant with Ezra, my oldest, at 23, and my midwife at the time was like, "Hey, you are so malnourished. Like, I just don't think you can keep this baby to term." And so obviously as a young mom, soon to be mom, that was really hard to hear. And so it sort of made me be like, okay, how can I help my body through this season? And I did have a beautiful baby boy in a birth center, and immediately had like a pups hives reaction postpartum. And it was really hard. And even my midwife was like, yeah, I mean, this happens only occasionally. She just really didn't know how to help me. And all that to say, I could tell my body was moving towards a stage of crisis. And so I went to my primary care doctor at the time and I was like, hey, and then he had me see, a nurse practitioner, and they had me chronicle my diet and what I was eating at that time. And they were like, you're really healthy. Like, we don't know what's going on. And so then I went to see a specialist for the pain that I was having. And he literally said to me, we're just going to have you get sicker to see what's going on.
Oh my gosh.
And as a young mom, I'm like, I don't want to get sicker. I don't want to move further to crisis. My body's communicating something and I want to listen to it. And so turns out a little bit sicker was a lot sicker. I had an emergency appendectomy at 5 months postpartum. And I will never forget the moment of just saying goodbye to my husband and new baby, just like praying to wake up. They didn't give me an option. They were like, hey, this is about to rupture. It's gangrenous. We got to go. I woke up from that and two very pivotal things happened. Number one, I woke up craving chicken broth. And I asked the nurses, I was like, hey, I'm like really craving chicken broth. Do you guys have any of that? And she was like, bless her heart. She's like, we have these like little chicken flavored MSG packets. Like, can I put that in hot water for you? And I was like, stop, not what I'm wanting. But and then the surgeon in the post-op said, "Hey," and he was sort of, I don't know, different. He showed me a picture. He was like, "Are you squeamish?" And I was like, "No." And he was like, "This is what the inside of your body looked like. This is why I had to take it out." And he goes, "Look at this. You're gonna have to have your gallbladder out in like 3 to 6 months."
Oh my gosh.
And I was like, "No." Like this cannot be the trajectory of my life, right? And so I searched high and low, how do you heal the body? How do you heal the gut? And I found Sally Fallon's, Nourishing Traditions. And then she had just come out with Nourishing Broth and, found that bone broth spans cultures and centuries, but it was missing from the modern diet. And so after that, I went on a 5-week bone broth diet because I thought, what do I have to lose?
Right.
At this point, it's only up from here. And so fast forward, 10 years later, I've had 6 healthy boys, have navigated a couple other illnesses, and I never needed that second surgery. I still have a healthy gallbladder. So
I have so many questions. One is, okay, so before you got your appendectomy and you're going from doctor to doctor. Did anyone test your blood? Did anyone test your stool? Was there any testing at all?
Yeah, my husband and I joked because when I had Lyme disease, so we'll talk about that next, sort of it was the same thing, right? You could just tell. They were like, well, we're going to check your blood and we're going to give you an x-ray and we're going to do an ultrasound. And it was like, no matter what practitioner I saw, we're going to check and I was like, at this point, I've had 5 of these and we're not getting any answers. And they did check the blood, but no DNA, no hair, saliva, no stool, right? Which would have been like a very easy way to see some of the things that were going on. But I think also, I have always been in tune with my body. And sometimes doctors really like to discourage people who are bodily aware because it creates more work for them. Eventually, some of my symptoms would have to scream for me to listen. But usually I'm pretty in tune with like, okay, something's not right here. And, now you've got such an increase of like functional nurse practitioners, functional dietitians, functional doctors, where they really embrace that. And they're like, okay, this is what your body's communicating. Really interesting. I mean, this is, 11, 12 years ago. If you didn't fit like the pathology, she's a mom. She just had a baby. She's having pain on the upper right side. It's probably gallbladder. And that's what they thought it was. They just didn't think it was bad enough to take it out. No one thought, even in the ultrasounds, to look at my appendix, right? They were just looking in that one area.
And then did they ever diagnose you with any sort of condition? Like, do you to this day know why? Or do you think it just was rooted from your kidneys as a baby?
That's a great question. So my functional MD at this point, sort of retroactively has said, hey, I think you just had chronic IBS and you had nutrient absorption issues and you were very young and the body is regenerating all the time. And so it took a crisis of pregnancy, which is a big physical, emotional, spiritual, nutritional, and then of course breastfeeding output to really, it was too much inflammation for the body to handle and repair at that point. Right.
Okay, so you had your first at 23. When you are in your teenage years, though, are you feeling okay? Like, did you always kind of just feel mediocre?
So it's a great question. I wouldn't have said that at the time.
Okay.
But like there were things I noticed looking back where I'm like, I really didn't like to eat because I would feel bloated. I was always thin, which I thought was like, oh, I'm healthy. I was very athletic and played a lot of sports. And so, but I think there were a couple of things like, I had a fainting episode that I actually still don't remember. My mom had to tell me about it. And so there are some of these like signs of like, okay. And then I did a lot of speech and debate as well as sports and athletics. And you can kind of just see this adrenal hyperdrive. Like I think my fight or flight, in some ways to my benefit, was an overdrive for a long time. And so I've always been kind of in high performance situations. I've like excelled in those things. But looking back, I'm like, wow, was there ever a state of just like calm being? No.
Right. No. Right.
I would have a bowel movement once a week. And you're like, okay, looking back, I'm like, that is not okay.
No.
But I didn't know. I didn't know at the time. And so, and I think, again, as I said, there's been a lot of more education around even healthy eating, right? So, but when you asked me, did you know, that you were feeling mediocre, it took me having a 5-week bone broth diet. And I did start to incorporate soups and stews at the end of it. So it was like bone broth, then pureed soups, then like heartier stews and soups. Then I would have a cup of bone broth with like a salad or, a roast. And so really rebuilt my digestion. I felt better than I'd felt in my entire life. And that was an aha moment where I felt like I'd stumbled upon like a key to something, and I could give this key to other people to unlock their health. And it was so simple. And that for me was just foundational foods, right? Starting with bone broth.
Were you making your own bone broth every day for that cleanse?
Yes, I was.
Okay.
And what I realized in that time, I love food. Ratatouille is like my favorite animated movie. And
Same.
It's like, it's so good. If you love food,
So
that
good.
movie like speaks to your soul. But I realized I'm also a picky eater, which can be common also, and like some, gut issues. But I would make the bone broth delicious because that was the only way I was going to consume it. So I started flavoring it to make it like a coffee or a tea. And I discovered this beautiful culinary application for bone broth where it's like an amazing way to infuse deep flavor, yes, nutrients, but also flavor in the entire dish. And that added collagen and gelatin actually helps with and of course protein, but helps with the assimilation of nutrients from the good food you're already eating. So
can you explain that a little bit more?
Yes.
The collagen and the gelatin portion?
Yes. So bone broth is a rich source of minerals, great source of electrolytes, but it is also a source of gelatin and collagen specifically. So the gelatin is really what happens in the water transfusion from the bone marrow and the joint parts of the animal. So the pasture raised chicken or the grass fed, grass finished beef, these joint parts, and then that cartilage is really melts down, infuses into the water, and that's what makes the bone broth gel. And a lot of questions that I get is like, if I'm having a bone broth powder or if I take a collagen supplement in a pill, is it doing the same thing for me as bone broth? And like theoretically, right, you're taking the same thing, but what I would like to also explain is bone broth gives it to your body in a way that it just literally heals and seals the gut lining. If you're taking a pill, you have to know that you can break down that pill. You have to know that your body can assimilate those nutrients. Bone broth is really the ultimate fast food, and it is such a good gut repair. And, as you guys, I'm sure I'm speaking to the choir here, but, these tight junctions in our gut lining, they get loose, they let food, toxins, particulate through. So even if you are taking high quality supplements, even if you are eating nutrient dense food, you could, like me, have a nutrient absorption issue like I did, where, bone broth is really the key to healing and sealing the gut. And digestion is an inherently kind of stressful process on the body. And it's not a bad stress, like our bodies know how to do it, but it is. And the cell lining of the gut is only 1 cell thick. So it is easily scratched. This is why, we recommend daily bone broth consumption, because you're just constantly replenishing that gut lining. And my favorite, you didn't ask this, but because of this, my favorite times to consume the broth are first thing in the morning, or actually as a nightcap before you go to bed, just as you start that natural regeneration process at night. And so it's got great minerals in it. Our bone broth actually has more potassium than most, which I find interesting, just as you kind of round out that electrolyte profile. And then, of course, protein to increase the protein value. But really, it's the gelatin and collagen that just comes in and literally heals and seals the gut lining to increase that nutrient absorption.
Yeah.
I'm so glad you talked about that, because it's one of my favorite topics. A lot of people say I can't eat so many different foods. I'm having autoimmune reactions. I'm having this and that. I'm like, you have to literally, exactly what you said, heal and seal the gut lining if you want to protect your body and not have that happen. And I think, as you were saying, bone broth is such an amazing tool for that. And it helps you hydrate, right? You're talking about potassium and electrolytes, and everyone wants to say, you need to drink so much water. I'm like, okay, drink your water, right? But hydrate through foods, and bone broth is one of those foods.
Exactly. It's exactly right.
One of our questions for you is why bone broth, right? Like, why did you start a bone broth company? And I think from all of that, I don't even need to ask it because it makes so much sense. Like, it sounds like bone broth was the catalyst to you really starting to heal your body. And now after that, so you then went on to have 5 more boys. Which I knew you had 6 kids, but I didn't know they were all boys, which is like, Jill, I don't know if you saw, Jill and Mike, when you said that, our jaws literally fell to the floor. You are amazing.
What are the ages of your boys?
Yeah.
So it's 11 to almost 1.
Oh my gosh.
So they are just near and dear to me. And I've loved being a mom. I've loved running a business. I think if I had my identity either only in my kids or only in my career, my life would not be as full. There are ebbs and flows in both, and having the perspective of both, and having sort of that broader sense of identity. I am not just this. I am not only that. I am yes and. Yes and is like my team will tell you that's like my favorite phrase. Is like a life mantra.
We both have a lot of friends currently pregnant. So selfishly, for our best friends at home, what did you do those next 5 pregnancies during pregnancy to stay really well nourished and to make sure that you could keep your health as high as possible to support your baby?
My second son, Uriah, actually came very quickly. He was born 15 months after Ezra was born. So not only am I I had emergency surgery, and then I find out I'm pregnant. And I thought, okay, I really have to support my body in this next season. And so that's where, I've never done it alone. Even though the traditional medical community failed me and became something that I was like, okay, just not going to go for answers here. I still, in humility was researching, okay, what supplements really help replenish these nutrients, organ meats, right? Animal-based fats. I have always been a eat fat, lose fat kind of girl. And it's funny, people will often tell me like, why do you not have brain fog? Because I have a very good memory. And I would tell you it's the consumption of a high amount of fat in my diet. And it also helped make my breast milk really nutritious. But I think it is finding those sources you can trust and really sifting through, okay, what's right for my body, what's right for my baby. And every pregnancy, every baby is different. And so we've had 4 babies in the birth center and 2 babies in the home. And every time we asked ourselves, just also praying and discerning, like, is this the time where we should maybe go a traditional route and be in the hospital for this baby? And every time, we really felt strongly that was not the right place for me. And you can understand that given my history, having 2 emergency surgeries, having a lot of distrust with the medical community, giving birth in the hospital was not a place that even just think of like this, my nervous system was going to be able to feel safe there. So I've listened to a lot of other women. I'm very critical of new things that come about. A lot of what I do in pregnancy and in delivery is on the shoulders of midwives who have done this for essentially centuries, because they've learned from other midwives who did it before them and other midwives who did it before them. And then, I really love Aviva Ram. I think she has a really good balanced perspective on, she became a doctor from, being a midwife, and she has a really good balanced perspective on like what herbs you can take. And I think just being very critical, pregnancy is such a vulnerable time. And I feel like people sense that for better or worse. Like they give you so much advice, and you can just kind of be this receptacle for a lot of things that people share. And so I think just being very careful about what voices you listen to. You know your body better than anyone, full stop. And if you do not feel like you have a doctor or a OB or a midwife that you like, then don't stop until you find the right one. That would be my advice, because birth is hard. There's trauma in it. It doesn't matter. I did everything, quote unquote, right that you could do. It was still hard, still painful. I still had to deal with some craniosacral healing from these experiences, right? These really big outputs. And to add to that, on top of it, sort of, additional medical trauma, people often wonder how we can have so many kids, right? Like, we didn't have, that negative medical intervention in the hospital experience where we felt like we were hostages there for several days, or we weren't listened to, or that my, wishes weren't honored, or that I didn't get to hold my baby right away. Like, I think there's a lot that we do as a society, as a first world country. We have a cesarean rate that's worse than most third world countries. And I don't want that experience for women. I understand if we need to have it. And is it still beautiful? Yes. Is there still a way that you can have a deep connection with your baby? Yes. But no, it is not what I would want for every woman. And I do think it limits the amount of children that women feel like they can have if they have such like a traumatic, first and second experience. So birth can be really beautiful and empowering. It is so important to find people you trust, and it is so important to listen to your body.
Yeah, I love all of that. So now fast forward and you have 6 kiddos that need to be nourished and fed.
Yes.
How do you, I think about this all the time, and I'm not even married or on my way to having kids yet, but I think about how difficult it must be to fuel your children in today's world where the shelves are filled with every sugary, super processed artificial snack out there, because you want them to be kids and you want them to have those fun experiences, but you also want them to grow up to be really healthy. So how do you navigate that?
Yeah. So, we could not live the life that we live, right? This kind of high performance. We run a company. We have 6 boys. The boys do a lot of sports, if we did not eat the way that we do. And so I like to just tell people, like, I'm not special. My family is not special. The things that we do, like, you could do them and might even do them better, but we're consistent. And so, like, one of the things that we eat is we only eat grass-fed, grass-finished beef, pasture-raised chicken. Like, it starts with our protein, pasture-raised eggs. We do drink milk from the farm, right? And have for 10 years. And so protein is a big part of our diet, and quality sourced protein. Now, that does not mean we were having a ribeye every night. In fact, our most common meal is we will have bone broth rice, so regeneratively raised bone broth rice, and it's a bowl, right? And we have our tallow roasted veggies on there, and our ground beef or our chicken thighs. And so in a large family, we're not eating, like, of course we enjoy steak, and love to do that, but that's not every meal. And, we're not having chicken breasts with every meal. We're using some of these cheaper cuts to continue to sustain our family. And what's interesting is, the chicken thighs have a lot more flavor. The dark meat has more nutrients. The drumsticks, you start to have that gelatin breakdown right there in the meat as you're eating it. And so we are consistent with our protein. And then as far as our fruits and vegetables, we really love, like, I make a watercress soup. And it was funny that, it just came out as, like, on the CDC's, like, nutrient density list, it was 100 out of 100. And it's an antihistamine, which is really rare as a green. It has low oxalate profile, which I always look for if I'm going to consume greens. And so it's just kind of funny to see these things that, our bodies have naturally gravitated toward, like, hey, we don't feel any gut disruption when we eat this. This feels great. And then, you kind of find out later, oh, wow, like, this is a very nutrient dense, kind of no harm green. And, we do love to incorporate organic fruits and vegetables are pretty much a non-negotiable. We do go off the dirty dozen list again, like big family. So if there are places that, we feel like we can have some conventional or really locally grown right? We're a part of the Farm Connection here in San Antonio. And so we buy from as many local farmers as we can. And then I have my own regenerative garden. So I actually have like a cantaloupe and a watermelon still going strong right now. And I'm like,
Yay.
oh, it's mid-September.
Right.
But, so it's fun to do that and to get them closer to their food.
Yeah. What about the snack part? How do you, are there brands that you love, or, what's your mindset there?
You said something earlier about sort of, if you're having an inflammatory response to these foods, you need to start with the gut. Mm-hmm. And one of the things that we do not do is we do not do an elimination diet. So like our boys are allowed to have sourdough. Like I said, we incorporate some grains like rices.
Good. Yeah.
As far as the snacks, my husband makes a really mean, amazing chocolate chip cookie, and the boys bring those to school. They're handmade. Right? Mm-hmm. We're using high quality flour that is glyphosate free. We're using sprouted oats, dark chocolate chips. Like there are these swaps that you can make where I really feel in our family is, our non-negotiables. Absolutely no food dyes ever. Never, never, ever. And that is sometimes hard, but there are so many great options now. Like if, you want to include, like we kind of feel like people, oh, the Seelands are bringing baseball treats again, right? Because we're bringing like the fruit juice based gummies, the Unreal bars, like, but we're like, we're just not going to do that. We're not going to bring the, and avoiding MSG and excitotoxins and even like their sneaky names. You have to be careful with like yeast extract. And I also think there's like, my son he's in 6th grade now, so he's doing the middle school things, and he went to his first like 6th grade Six Flags trip, and they were trying to get him to eat like dessert, and he was like, I'm going to do a fruit parfait. And what's so cool about that is like, I've been very transparent with the kids about why we don't eat certain things. I want to inform them because that's part of the like, I remember forever my friends eat at McDonald's, why can't I eat there? So we showed them the ingredient list, right? Of like, hey, this is what's in the French fries, and this is, what's in this dressing from Chick-fil-A. Like, this is just, we don't feel comfortable now, and then they wanted to try it. So fine, after so many times of asking, like, we're going to go through the McDonald's drive-thru. We're just going to let you try it. Right, and they did. And, they took one bite and they were like, oh, this doesn't. And so I think sometimes like with children, the point of that is to say, you can inform them, you help them make better decisions. And then in safety, you do let them experience like, hey, when you have like a couple of Doritos, you're crazy. You are running around the house like a crazy person. And you're not usually like that. Right. And And so I think the other thing with boys too is like boys are so susceptible to food dyes, especially red 40 can cause a lot of rage. And so we will let them in these moments, right? Like have the M&Ms from their friends. And it's like, oh man, do you see how you like had this rage session, and like, does that feel good for you? And so I think just helping them understand the why behind it, it doesn't feel so restrictive. And then, like I said, in our house, desserts aren't the main food, but we love to indulge in a way that's good and balanced.
Yeah. I love all of that. I mean, I'm a health practitioner, so like you're completely speaking my language, and I hope to raise my kids like that and have them eat that way. You. And yeah, it's amazing. It really is. And, but to a lot of people, and I'm sure you know this, you're not the norm, right? Yeah. You're hard to achieve. You're all of these words that people like to use because mainstream, the standard American diet, it's opposite truly of what you are feeding your kids, which this podcast, like everyone knows who listens to it, like we've said it enough times, like it shouldn't be like that, but it is. Can you give your best advice to someone listening to this right now? And that might seem like their brains are probably going like, whoa, I don't even know where to start. I know you said you start with protein and you start with high quality protein. Can you give just a couple quick tips to how a family can start eating more that way?
So my first recommendation is going to be start putting bone broth instead of water in your rice.
Love that.
So if you are, doing crock pot meals or like these other things, first of all, if you're making any food at home, like great job.
Yeah.
I'm so proud of you. That's like the biggest step in the right direction. And I know that takes time. So just be happy and proud of yourself for that. Secondly, putting bone broth in place of water in any recipe is going to add nutrient density. So I'm saying put it in your quinoa when you cook your quinoa. Put it in your soups when you make your soups. Put it in your sauces when you make your sauces. We make macaroni and cheese in our family with bone broth instead of milk in the sauce.
That's awesome.
Wow.
So it's easier than you think when you start saying, okay, use in place of water in any recipe. And that, just on its own, the protein content, the mineral content is going to add more nutrients than the water. So that's an easy win. Also, I add it to my marinara. If you make chili or you make spaghetti marinara, add bone broth to the marinara. Add it to the spaghetti. Don't go out of your way to do different things in the routine. If you have meals that work for you, we put bone broth in our sloppy joes. The second thing that I would say is I love Force of Nature's Ancestral Blend.
I had it for breakfast this morning.
Yeah. We just had him on the pod too. Yeah.
Oh, is there anything easier than subbing your ground beef for ancestral ground beef and getting organs into the diet? So easy. And it does go on, if the budget is a concern, do it 10% of your meals. 10% of your meals are regeneratively raised meat, right? We are on a budget you guys know the price of groceries are insane. We have 8 people to feed in our family. We understand being on a budget and being faithful to that budget. I would tell you that, with rare exception, snacks cost more than your meat. If you just did your normal grocery run and no cheating, and then you go home and you highlight on the receipt what are snacks versus what is the actual meat, I feel like the proteins and the meats are getting a bad rap when it's like, it's going to be like $50 minimum worth of snacks on there. Yeah. And the other thing we do is we don't allow our boys to have potato chips. We let them have pork rinds. They are allowed to have the Good Crisp has like a seed oil free palm oil based original, and they have another one. But if they're going to school, so our boys go to a classical school. I used to homeschool them, and baby number 6 came along, and I was like tapping the mat, know your limits. And we sent them to an amazing classical school. But if they're going to be eating away from us every day, we want to make sure there's nutrient density in that meal too. And so, we'll often do kind of like, our own version of Lunchables. Again, if you can large batch, so like grill a ton of chicken thighs in the beginning of the week, and then you cut that up and put that in the lunch with grapes and some cheese and some pork rinds and some dark chocolate, they're doing okay. They're doing good.
Just to wrap that up, I think, you mentioned when you notice how your kids get moody or kind of, a little wild per se, if they're eating something that they don't normally eat. Is there things that you've noticed, and I don't want to compare them to other kids, but in terms of behavioral or strength or growth or any of that you're like, this, I can totally attribute their diet to how they are growing up as young kids, young adults?
Yeah. So our doctor, which I think is a good data point because she sees a lot of children, she always comments on how thin and toned our children are. And the rate of non-alcoholic fatty liver disease in children is so heartbreaking. And it, to me, has a direct correlation. And I'm sure, you could even speak with more expertise on this, but to the consumption of soda, to the consumption of even sports drinks. That's probably like the hardest one because they kind of get this pass. Well, it's full of electrolytes, and no, it has vegetable oil and, food dyes in it. And if you look at how Gatorade started as a 5-ingredient product, then to be where it is today is, pretty shocking. But for her to just comment on, they're growing really well and they're not overweight. that should not be a rare thing. And unfortunately, as reported to me from, and I go to like, if there is such a thing as like a more holistic pediatrician, which I hesitate to even really make that, but like we go on like the more holistic spectrum, and for her to be still seeing so many children who are struggling with endocrine disorders, diabetes, anxiety, ADHD. And this is where we get to toxic load. So, you know, I think whether like all the decisions that you're making for your children too, we kind of have to be aware of, okay, yes, we can let some things slide. Sometimes the stress isn't worth, right? Being so meticulous or like being afraid, having a fear-based mindset for they can never consume, you know,
Right.
like processed food ever. But we do need to be mindful of the toxic load. And so like if they're in school all day, if they don't learn how to write, but they learn how to type and they're always answering on a tablet, okay, you just need to be aware like that level of screen time. And then we also need to think about if we're adding processed foods on top of that, and then we're going home and we're not playing sports and we're sitting in front of the TV or we're doing video games or we're on social media. I really feel like I have so much compassion for children today because I really feel like they're actually managing pretty well given all the things that are contributing to the toxic load. So, I mean, you can see the body doing that. What is the liver's job?
Yeah.
Right? To protect the
Filter.
body.
Yeah.
Yes, to filter things out. And but our bodies are powerful. They're regenerating every day, and children are so resilient. And so even for those parents out there that feel like, man, you know, I'm trying so hard, and parents have so much on their plate these days. Like the last thing I want to be is to make you feel hopeless or like you are not successful. I want to empower you that small changes are so transformative, and just start with putting bone broth in the rice and you will be amazed.
Yeah. I love that. Go.
Well, I was just going to say, I think all of that is amazing, but I do want to hear about Fond, and I want to hear about the company, because I think that it's really important to, now that everyone has this background on how to fuel themselves. And I think a lot of the listeners here, they're not maybe aware, but it's so reassuring to hear that it's happening in the real world, right? Because sometimes you see these like really perfect social media accounts and it's like, these are all the things we do, and it feels very unapproachable. But I think for you to be like, I have 6 kids and I'm running a company and this stuff can happen. You just have to, kind of have to want to do it, right? You can figure it out. But the company part too is so important because that's a huge story as to why you're here today. So we'd love to hear more about Fond, when you started it and the growth to where it's at today. And then we want to save some time too, for beef tallow because you mentioned it earlier and that has to be in this episode. So let's start with Fond and just how it started and how you've gotten to grow the business to where you're at.
Yeah, so Fond is really an experiment in will consumers pay for a high quality product made without compromise. And, you know, from the day we started, we had so much opposition. I'll go into that in a second, but you asked me why I started it. And it was really because there were no true bone broths on the shelf. And I would even tell you to this day, there is not a bone broth in cardboard that I know of that is not a rehydrated concentrate or reconstituted powder, right? So still, you know, I've had a lot of hardship in Fond. There have been many times when I was like, my life would be easier if I did not do this. But what keeps me going is that there is nothing out there like this product, and I want people to have it. And so if someone comes along and they can, you know, do it better than me and consumers can have that need met, you know, I can reevaluate this mission. But I think that's what keeps me going. And then secondly, the customer response, right? I think, you know, so many times we'll have someone say, for 16 years, you know, I wasn't able to eat anything and I drank Fond and it was like silk on my body. My body knew exactly what to do with it. Or, you know, you have people who we've been able to nourish their husband through through the season of hospice. And she, you know, it's like to minister to these people who are in just these crisis stages of life, kids dealing with cancer diagnoses, and then to see them come on the other side of that. We had a woman who was on doing chemo and radiation, and she drank our bone broth every day and her hair grew. And she was like, what is happening here? You know, what is this thing? And it's our bodies, right, are amazing agents of healing. We need to give them what they need. And so starting Fond was, you know, just felt like an uphill battle almost from day one. We were different because the FDA only requires 1 parts meat to 128 parts water. That's one like chicken leg, thigh, can be skin. It doesn't even have to be a bone, and 128 parts water. Fond is a 1-to-1. For every pound of bones, we're using a pound of water. So even starting out, the FDA and USDA was like, are you like a meat or are you a liquid? Because your protein ratio is so high, like we don't even know where to categorize you. So we were like, okay, you know, and then we approached a major grocer about getting on shelf, and they're like, yeah, I just don't think there's any way customers are going to pay this. And so I think the entrepreneurial journey is one of fighting for what you believe in, even in the midst of so much dissension. And I think what's been so cool is now to be on the other side of that, where, you know, we did launch in that major retailer 6 years later. And not only did we launch, but the product is exceeding expectations on all sides with how it's moving.
That's
and
great.
I'm so grateful for that. I'm so grateful for that. I think it's also a furious commitment to our customers to do it the best we can. You know, it's not everything is going to be perfect, but we test for lead every year in the bone broth. We have always had tests that are below detectable limits, right? I know people are concerned about bone broth and lead, heavy metals in bone broth. I think also glyphosate, right? If we're sourcing regeneratively and we have this pasture raised chicken, this grass-fed, grass-finished beef, you know, we want to make sure that we're helping to put back these inputs to the land that made this beautiful product possible. So our sourcing, right? But then we also want to make sure there's no glyphosate, right? A leading carcinogen, something that is a huge DNA disruptor. And bone broth kind of comes in where this place where glyphosate takes the place of glycine in the body. Well, if you flood the body with glycine, which bone broth is a excellent source of, you can kind of flush out, right? The thinking is you flush out some of this glyphosate and your body is able to, start repairing, and that DNA is able to function the way it's supposed to. So, we are packaged in glass because we don't want you to have microplastics in your bone broth. If we're going to make a healing product, we want to the best of our ability, do no harm to you or to the animal, except, you know, that one bad day. So.
And I know you can order Fond online, and then I know it's also in retailers. Are you in every state? Where are you at as far as the retail goes?
Yeah, so we are in Sprouts nationwide, and then we're in Whole Foods Market in the Texas Southwest region, same with H-E-B. We're in Erewhon and, you know, a couple of Wegmans. But yes, fondbonebroth.com. And then we also sell on Amazon. So.
Oh, great.
I know we have a code. I'll say it at the beginning,
Good.
But it's Gut Talk Girls for those listening right now. And I mean, Jill and I, a testament to you, Jill and I love your bone broth. Like, for every single person listening to this right now, it is incredible. It is amazing. And yeah, maybe it is worth, not maybe, it is worth spending maybe another, I don't know what the difference of pricing is, but if it is a little bit more expensive, you're hearing her say how much it's worth it, being that it is in glass container, the quality. I mean, you're the ratio. You're 1-to-1.
Yeah.
I know you probably don't want to speak negatively on the competition, but like, it's not sounding like they're also 1-to-1.
Well, and I also think the other thing too is the importance of listening to everything you've said today on the benefits, because people are willing to spend crazy money on supplementation
Yep.
Yeah.
and on all of these different powders and drinks because it makes their hair grow or their nails grow, right? And there's all
Exactly.
these powders, but when you really go back to the basics, and bone broth is something that's been around probably even longer than any of us even know, right?
Yeah.
It has so many healing properties that I think we love a supplement. We love a really cute package and something that tastes like berries. But at the end of the day, right? Like it's everyone wants to know, what can I take? What can I take? And I think when you kind of go back to the basics, bone broth is in those basics, and you've just found a way to make it tastier and enjoyable to drink. I like the idea of doing it at night, like before you go to bed, because I always go on and off. Sometimes I'll be a tea drinker before bed, then I kind of lose it. So I think I might put bone broth as my nightcap.
I would do it and let us know what you
Yeah.
think. I think between that and the tallow based, lotion that I put on my face, I've noticed a really big difference in my skin as well. And then, people do ask me for, like, what are your hair tips? And they kind of call us the hair family, and, because everyone has a crazy amount of hair. And it is I'm so low maintenance, you guys. I mean, the highest maintenance thing about me is the way that I eat. And like, I don't even use shampoo. I use a rice bar, right?
Oh my
So I mean, it's just like, it's funny because people are like, tell me your routine. And I'm like, I don't think you want to know. It's like
Right.
it's very lo-fi, but yeah. So, and we said we were going to get to the tallow.
Yeah,
So
please.
the second I wanted to launch tallow in 2019. So I knew we were starting with bone broth because if you think of these foundational foods, and the tie-in for why tallow goes back to what we started talking about in the beginning, nutrient absorption. So one of the things that is crucial about nutrient absorption is there are vitamins that are fat soluble. That means that you can only absorb them in fat. Right. And so we love tallow because it helps with absorption with vitamin A, D, E, K, right? These vitamins that Americans are actually pretty consistently chronically low in. I mean, specifically D and K. And so we love it for that reason. We are also having the tallow tested for iron levels. So an unintended benefit that we didn't realize is because when you render tallow, you're just cooking down the beef fat, and what you're doing is you're cooking out the water. And so when you do that, you concentrate the level of minerals in the tallow. So I don't have a exact report today because we're lab testing it, but something we can follow up on because customers have said, hey, this should have levels of iron in it based on the process. So we're responding to that and doing that. But I love it for, helping to increase with the absorption of those fat soluble vitamins. And then also our brains need fat, right? I just, this month was, there was an Alzheimer's Awareness Day, and I have a personal experience with that because my great grandmother had Alzheimer's. And I remember going to the nursing home and just the pain, right, of her not being able to remember my grandma and just being like, oh my goodness, even as a young girl, you're like, this is so sad. And then figuring out the root cause of that. And, we've demonized fats for so long. And then, we need nourishing fats to not only absorb minerals, but to fuel, right, our bodies. So we love it. We use it. I was surprised, a lot of the ways that we use it is to roast our vegetables. So our butternut squashes. I love to make a breakfast skillet in the morning, sweet potato, butternut squash, a little bit of, venison, chorizo, and some pasture raised eggs, and a little avocado. And we're doing that with the beef tallow. And we did sear a couple of steaks in it, and I was skeptical. I was like, is this gonna what is it? It's already, I was just like, I didn't know if it was any different.
Right.
And it was amazing. It was amazing. It was so tender. So we're really excited to add yet another foundational food to the lineup for people that is sourced regeneratively and that they can incorporate into their diet.
You said you put it on your skin. Is
Yes.
it the same stuff that you put in the pan to cook? You apply straight to your skin, or is there a different version of it?
That's a great question. So we have a pure and unflavored version. That's what I'm putting on my skin and my face right now. And then we actually have 3 versions that are infused. So just like our bone broth has these infusions, we have a chili garlic tallow, we have a turmeric cracked pepper tallow, we have a rosemary pink peppercorn tallow, and that's all about trying to make it easier for you guys to layer flavor into the meal, and you don't have to chop up a whole bunch of rosemary or shoot, I can't make this recipe because I didn't have it. And so we're trying to, increase nutrient density and then of course enjoyment, make it fun.
Yeah.
And can you quickly just explain, we should have done this at the beginning, I think people are probably like, what the heck is it? I don't think
Yeah.
We just jumped right into
we're
it.
just like so excited.
Yes. So it's actually the number 1 question on Google. What is tallow versus lard? So tallow is rendered beef fat. It's called beef suet. And we're proud to add this product to the lineup because it's part of our mission of using the whole animal. So like the bones, right? Not always used as widely as the other parts. And then of course the beef fat secondly. So that's great that we can continue to add, to the use of that. And it's also incredibly nutrient dense, as I said.
Yeah.
Cool.
This has been such a fun episode.
Yeah.
I feel like it's so great to talk to people who are living such healthy lifestyles, but doing it in a way that's fun. I think that's the biggest thing, that one of our biggest missions is just proving that you can live a really enjoyable life and a really fulfilled life, especially when it comes to food, going back to Ratatouille and making it fun,
Yes.
right? And not being this really stale, healthy, crunchy person that doesn't just really enjoy the things of life. And I think that you and your family are a really great example of that. So
Thank you.
thank you for coming on today. We're really appreciative of your time. And everyone, we'll put in the show notes how to find Fond, how to find you, and your socials.
We have to do our last, we started our new series.
Oh my gosh, I started it literally yesterday and almost forgot. We thought it would be fun for every guest to give one health hack that you have that you feel has really shifted your life, your health, whatever.
Even though you just gave us probably 10 throughout the
Yeah, and you can pick one of those, but just
add a bonus.
one hack that you feel like has leveled you up in any way that you think is fitting.
This is so simple, you guys, but it is a consistent sleep routine.
Yep.
A consistent sleep routine.
Snubs.
There is nothing that wrecks me like a bad night's sleep. And there is nothing that makes me feel like, girls, I can take on the world, right? Like a good night's sleep. And so we actually have a family routine. We turn the red light on.
I love it.
We start that melatonin production. We listen to the audiobook and that light goes off. Boom. And we go to sleep. So
I love it.
It's don't overthink it.
Yeah. Incredible. Well,
Yay.
thank you so much for coming on.
Yeah, we will do discount code in the show notes, everything. Can we find you? Should we send them to Fawn's Instagram account, your Instagram account? What?
Yes. Yeah.
Where can they find you?
We can do so it's Fond Bone Broth is our Instagram account, and mine is just Alysa Seeland. I definitely post silly boy memes too, so if you're into that, of life.
I love it. Cool. Well, thank you so much.
Yeah.
Yes, thank you, ladies.